Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
In this thread, childhood memories that make no sense.
My parents died in front of me when I was 10 years old. That I understood, though their funeral was odd to say the least. And none of the older folks in my family has since explained to me the rituals during the funeral of my parents, and I'm 23 now. I still don't know, because it's not part of anything of my cultural heritage. My parents died in a car crash. I was in the back seat. A drunk or drug driver smashed into the front of our car. I saw the life disappear from my dad's body. Like after a few words, I couldn't make out that he was saying. He just went limp, blood everywhere. Mother wasn't awake. Died on the way to hospital. I escaped with cuts and bruises, but nothing life-threatening. I remember blacking out when the ambulance arrived and woke up later in hospital with my uncles, aunties, my older siblings, and my little sister around me. I remember a heated discussion outside my room between family members. I can't remember what exactly was said, but what I can remember that there was an emphasis on 3 days. And my family didn't allow me to eat the hospital food. I was able to leave the hospital the next day because my injuries were not bad. When I left, my auntie and uncle took me aside and said that I was not allowed to eat anything until the ceremony. I thought that was bullshit. I was sort of hungry, but I had to listen to them. Well, exactly 3 days later, to the T, at exactly the time the crash occurred, so it was at night, there was a ceremony held for my parents at some place I don't know. Family members and friends from around the country and wherever else came. Everyone had to be dressed in gray, so there were people in all shades of gray. By this time, I was just really hungry, but I had to be dressed in black when everyone else was in gray. How it was explained to me at the time was because I was with them in their last moments. I had to wear certain things at the ceremony, like the tips of my fingers had some special black tape on them, and I had to wear some undergarments under my black suit. I remember the undergarments felt nice. I think satin or silk or something. All black. So when the time came, my auntie said that this man was going to guide me through the process of sending my parents off. And this wasn't a conventional funeral, I was soon to learn. This man in a dark gray robe cloak thing, looking like a reject from a low-budget horror film, was to be the man guiding me through. I remember he held my left hand and walked me out from the back room into a huge room where everyone was gathered, people crying, etc. There were 6 others at the altar aside from the man holding my hand, and there were 2 ornately decorated low-level tables and benches. My parents were then carried out by the 6 altar boys or whatever they were and placed on the tables. They were in robes, all blood cleaned up. I remember shaking at this point and seeing my parents dead like that. I didn't want to go near them. The man holding my hand pulled me towards my parents' bodies. I sort of resisted and looked at my auntie in the front row, and she just nodded at me as to say that it was okay and I was just to follow the man. So I walked reluctantly towards my parents, dressed in robes, looking all nice and pretty. The man got my left hand, lifted it towards my father's face. He whispered in my ear and told me that under the neck of my father were 2 coins. Place these on his eyes. Then he looked at the rest of the people attending and started to speak in my father's mother tongue. I didn't really understand. I spoke mostly English growing up. So I felt under his neck and grabbed the 2 coins, thinking they were going to be like the $1 coins here in Australia, but it was some silver coins which didn't look like anything I've seen. Placed them on my dad's eyes as instructed. Then he said to do the same to my mother. I did. She had 2 coins under her neck and I put them on her eyes. After a few words, the man spoke in my mother's mother tongue. Everyone in the audience stood up and placed their right hand with the thumb and little finger together, so you're left with the index, middle and ring fingers joined over their hearts. After a few more words from the man guiding me through this, everyone sat back down. All the while I had to stand facing everyone. The man put his left hand over my eyes and spoke the crowd again in my father's language. I heard everyone stand up again and repeat a phrase the man just said. Then I heard a lot of crying from the people there. The man said I then had to kiss both of my parents on their left eyes. Now I know why these tables were so low in the first place, so that I could reach them without help from anyone. I kissed them on their left eyes, and then I had to place my forehead face down on their foreheads, stand at the head's end of the table. Bad analogy, but much like the Spider-Man kiss upside down sort of thing. I was then led away. Then my parents were taken to be cremated. What happened to the ashes, no one has ever told me. I'm not supposed to ask about it. I remember after the ceremony I was given a large meal and was left alone in one of the back rooms in the same building where the ceremony was held, not sure if they were cremated in the same building.
When I was around 4, my parents put me in this massive coal bunker in the garden overnight, as a punishment for something. We moved away for ages and I forgot about it, but I walked past it a few years ago and saw the coal bunker and remembered it. I asked my parents, and they said they remembered it too, like it wasn't a big deal, and just shrugged it off. And my parents weren't abusive or anything, just normal people. Who the hell puts a 4-year-old in a dark hole full of coal overnight? Could have fucked up my lungs as well as my brain. It's so weird. And I don't even remember it as traumatic or anything, just weird and incongruous. I also distinctly remember there being grass in the garden one day, and a kipper barbecue, which is wrong because it was always paved, never had grass. I also had this toy Frankenstein monster whose jacket opened up, and it was full of cogs and shit that you could move about, and he had a key or something to take his head off. I was playing with it in the garden, and it disappeared. Just vanished right in front of me.
I have 2. Not so sure whether the second one is real or not. First one was when I was around 9 or 10. I can only seem to remember this far back. It's like I have no memories from before then. It was around 2 a.m., and I woke up in my bed and heard my mother call my name a few times from the dining room in a calm, soft tone, almost like a whisper. But I heard it from my room, which was on the other side of the house. I got up and went to the dining room and said, "Yeah, Mum," and got no response, so I then called her a couple of times. Then I heard her say, "What?" from her room, and I asked why she called my name, but she said she didn't, and that she was asleep until I called her. I know that this wasn't a dream, and I definitely heard my name being called. Second one is a bit more weird, around the same time too. I had nightmares often and frequently woke up during the night. My mum believes in the paranormal a fair bit, so she called a medium, or some other psychic person like that, to do a cleansing of any spirits from the home, thinking some nasty spirit was keeping me from sleeping. After it was done, the medium said that she'd seen a spirit in the doorway of my room. A very tall, thin man with long, bony fingers, wearing a tuxedo and a top hat. What sort of scared me, though, was I have a memory from before that, where I remember walking down the hallway to my room after school and seeing that same man standing in my doorway, but his suit was striped. I remember something about walking in an empty desert in the southwest during sunset. I was with 2 people. They both dressed in black, and I couldn't see any other features but that. Looking back on it, they kind of had that punk rock kind of vibe to them. One of them was carrying a black trash bag. It felt cold outside, and the only thing you could see besides the shadows cast by the cacti was a busy Shell station that illuminated the area around it. The place was filled with cars, but no people. We got into a black Jeep, and in the rear-view mirror was an Oreo cookie with imposable arms and shit hanging on it. I remember watching it swing as we drove down the desolate road. I remember making hand gestures like I wanted it, and the guy in the passenger seat looked at me and poked the other guy. The driver said, "No, sorry, you can't have that." Everything from there was black, and then it was nighttime, and we arrived in what looked like a garage in the middle of the desert. The lights were bright, and the inside of the garage was very clean. On the left was a wall-long shelf with paint and shit on it, and the back part of the wall was a ladder and a car covered in the middle of the room. I hear the guys having a conversation that I couldn't understand and hearing a loud nose. I see the 2 men walk back out and motion me to come with, but I refuse. So they shut the garage door on me and I start crying. I woke up to find an Oreo bendy figurine under my pillow like the one in my dream. I still get reminded of the dream sometimes, like when I'm listening to music or even just daydreaming. Now that I'm thinking about it and remembering things, this isn't the only dream I have had of being in strange places with strange people.
There was this one time when a friend and I were sitting on my bed. Both of us were like 10 years old or something, drawing. It was a clear, sunny midsummer day with birds singing and wind blowing. The window was open, the lights were on, and it was bright outside. Suddenly everything went pitch black for her and I. It was so dark that you couldn't even see your hand in front of you. It was like being locked away in a room that cancels out all sound and light, or at least something like that. I remember feeling the soft bed vanishing from under me, only to be replaced by cold, hard, slick ground. Then I heard my friends start crying out to me, asking what was going on. Dazed, I rushed to my feet and ran around frantically, calling back to her. This continued for about 5 minutes, but it was useless. Our screams and footsteps only echoed around. We never reached each other in this cold, empty darkness. It's all hazy after that. Well, until the point where she and I were sitting adjacent to one another on the bed. Everything back to the way it was, like it never even happened. We stared at one another for about a minute. Her pale, horror-stricken face probably mimicked the look on mine. After calming down, we went back to doing normal stupid kid things and sooner or later put it beside us. We never even talked about it, and as time passed, we grew apart.
Since I was very vocal from an early age, I've been able to remember things from early in my childhood very well. The thing is, I remember a lot of really embarrassing things, but at this point I have thought them to the point of absurdity, so that they seem like something that couldn't have happened in real life. Also, when I was younger, in elementary and middle school, I was convinced I could do magic. There were a lot of strange coincidences, especially when I wished for a guy to break a limb so he could spend gym class in the library with me. And 3 days later he came to school with a broken arm. Also, a few years ago, I think I was almost 17 at the time, I woke up at about 4 in the morning because there was a rattling noise coming from the wall behind my bed. Usually stuff like that stops if I put my hand out to quell whatever vibrations, but this time, it got worse and showed no signs of stopping. I freaked out and jumped in bed with my mom and slept there until it was time to get up for school. It turns out that there had been an earthquake at that exact time in the morning, and while earthquakes are rare in Chicago, where I lived, they're not unheard of. So, nothing paranormal at all. Another bizarre thing that I believe to have done was to summon a cat. I had turned 11 2 months prior to the event. One night before I went to bed, I was looking through a book of cats and talking to my mom. Possibly significant is the fact that around my birthday, we had to put one of our cats to sleep. So instead of having 3 cats, which I was used to, we only had 2. I'll touch more on this later. I was asking my mom about getting a new cat, and I told her, I wish we could get a kitten. It would be a little black girl kitten, and I would name her Hecate. I like the witches from Macbeth, hence the name. My mom was like, yeah, whatever, go to bed. The next day we went into downtown Chicago because my sister had to go to a doctor's appointment. At the time, Millennium Park was still being built, but on Michigan Avenue, right before going underneath the buildings, on the Grant Park side of the street, we saw what turned out to be an 8-week-old black kitten running along. Long story short, we were able to catch the kitten, and despite it being nearly 5 p.m. when everything closes, we were able to get the kitten to a vet, since the kitten was kind of banged up, looked to be missing an eye, and my mom was worried that it had internal injuries. Before running into the vet, I told my mom, maybe the kitten can be my familiar. And she basically told me to shut up before she ran into the vet and left me to lock up the car. Kitten ended up being perfectly healthy, although we had to treat him for fleas, worms, and a cold. And yeah, it was a boy, so I named him Hector, the closest male equivalent to Hecate I could come up with. It was that or Black Malkin. What a dork. Weird coincidence with my other cat was that she looked very similar to this new kitten. Not only that, but we had put her to sleep on June 10th. We found the kitten in mid-August, and he was about 8 weeks old then. This means that he was born probably within 3 days of, if not on June 10th. Just a little weird.
I was exploring a bit of forest near some railroad tracks with a friend when I was young, maybe 9 years old. There was a place with a collapsed house and a bunch of toilets and a busted jungle gym. We went there a lot to play in the junk. One time, there was a shack back near the railroad tracks that we hadn't seen before. It looked old, made out of wood, kinda like an outhouse. We started trying to get to the shack through the woods, but there wasn't a path. Suddenly, there was a bunch of rustling in the brush and bushes, like something big moving around. We were used to smaller things like squirrels and raccoons, and even sometimes deer, but this seemed really big. The first thought was that it was a crazy person who lived in the shack who was going to shoot us. The second thought was that it was a horse because it seemed bigger than a person. We didn't wait to see what it was, since we really weren't supposed to be out there. We ran like hell. A month or so later, when we had the guts to go back, we couldn't find that shack, or any signs that it was there. Maybe, as a kid, my perceptions or sense of direction were off, but I still can't explain that sense of a big thing moving, or why we never found that shack.
I very vividly remember night terrors that I used to have. They had to have stopped by 6 or 7, but I still remember them like yesterday. It's very hard to describe what I'd see while in the state, but I might as well try. Sorry if I fucked this up, but seriously, it's almost can't be explained. The only way I can describe it is through colors, shapes, and feelings. I'll say the color, and then list things that I associate with the part. Here goes nothing, just bear with me. It would start gray, silvery, metallic, round like a circular room, although it was also nothing like that, of course. Gray and round. Bubbles come to mind. During this phase of my night terror, all would be very calm. Next comes the green and yellow. I'd be happy at this phase, glowing. Rolling in grass comes to mind, although, again, it was not a damn thing like it. You must remember that a night terror isn't a dream, just like some sort of sensory explosion. There really aren't words to describe it, but I'm trying. Then it would be brown, gray, and black, all rushing upward. What comes to mind is a spinning tire picking up mud, just rushing ever upwards. This is the part of my terror in which I'd leave my happy feeling and slowly fill with pure dread. Then, finally, the white. I would be filled with raw, primordial fear. Awe, even. A feeling that I really can't describe. It felt as if an enormous sound had abruptly and startlingly stopped, although, of course, there was none. And it felt in slow motion, yet there was no movement. The feeling of trying to catch something falling that you know you'll never be able to get to in time. And then a black line would cut down, piercing the white. And that's when time would stop and I would break with horror, and I wouldn't be able to think of anything at all. These phases would loop and loop and loop without end. While this was going on, I'd be sitting on my parents' bed, eyes wide open and bloodshot, screaming and crying my eyes out until I'd pass out from exhaustion or go back to sleep. Night terrors are scary shit.
I know what you're talking about, man. I used to have them too. It got so bad that I would feel when one was coming on. It's hard to explain, but it does feel like sensory explosions. I could tell I would have one because as I fell asleep, it would start to seem like I could feel every smallest bit of anything that was touching me. It was like the individual atoms of everything were sharply stabbing me, almost like how grass feels. Then I'd start to see intensely complex and seemingly infinite structures in my head, like grids and fractals and infinite planes of skyscrapers. It was like they were walls slowly expanding, so that I could simultaneously see the infinitely smallest detail of all this stuff, and the whole infinitely vast expanse of it.
It happened one night, when I was about 5 years old. I was sitting on the floor in my room, playing with some toys before going to bed. I looked up at the window and saw a face clearly staring back at me through the blinds. I could not determine the sex of the face, but the skin was grayish. It was gaunt, skeletal, and in retrospect, in a late stage of decomposition. The eye sockets were very wide due to the level of decay. The scalp was a deep red, matted with blood, with the skull jutting through the crown. At the time, I didn't understand what I was seeing, but I knew that it was impossible for someone to be looking in through my window, since my room was on the 2nd floor. I swiftly ran downstairs to tell my parents what I had seen, but could only describe it as a robot Santa Claus. Robot because it was gray, and Santa Claus because its scalp was red and white. I don't know if what I saw was a dream or not, but I do know that the house was over 100 years old, and according to my parents, there had been a tragedy several decades ago in which the owner of the house had committed an hero by shooting himself in the head.
Not exactly paranormal, but doesn't quite make sense. My mother insisted I could never get away with lying to her. She could interrogate me in my sleep. I'd sit up with my eyes open and have a perfectly normal conversation with her, where I'd always tell the truth. I'd remember nothing in the morning, not even as a dream. She said she could do this with my brother, too. I was in psychotherapy in grade school. They'd take me out of my class once or twice a week, and I'd talk with a psychologist for an hour or two. There were 3 or 4 psychologists there. They had their own set of offices in the annex next to the library and computer lab. This was an ordinary public school in a rundown neighborhood. No one ever told me what my problem was, and I never really thought to ask. I just thought it was a normal thing some of us had to do. My brother, much later, mentioned that I was schizophrenic up until I was about 4. I don't even know how you'd tell a schizo from a normal 4-year-old, or how anyone could go from clinically insane as a toddler to more or less normal by middle school. This was the 1970s, the days of electroshock, thorazine, and lobotomies. There's no way they could have just given me Paxil or some shit until I got better. I don't remember anything from before I was about 5, so I don't know, maybe.
I remember that loud noises made my head feel like there was a massive shape of whatever kind in it. Not like a physical pain, I just had the sensation of a huge body of mass in my thoughts. Like they had physical mass on the plane of thought, and all my other thoughts were being pushed against the wall of that plane. I have no way to explain it, so I'm going to stop trying. I also remember dreaming before I was born that I met my whole family, like everyone, and was introduced to them in a waiting room and pissed on my grandma. But when I was actually born, I remember that only my grandmother and parents were there. But all through childhood I knew everyone's name and recognized them even if I hadn't met them. My mother recounts about how I said hello to my aunt, uncle, and older cousin by name at a family gathering before I'd ever met them or heard about them. There are more, but I really want to know if anyone had the mass in your head thing going on. It still happens, and I don't know what it is exactly or if it's a thing at all.
When I was around 5, my family lived in the south suburbs of Chicago in a brick bungalow. It was a 1-story house, but the basement was a bit raised, so the first floor windows were probably 6.5 or 7 feet off the ground. My bedroom looked out over the backyard. I remember very clearly looking out the back window and seeing a man, or a silhouette of a man, with a tall top hat looking in my window. I ran to my parents' room and they said, "Of course not, you're dreaming. Go back to bed." It happened for weeks, and I couldn't sleep. I was terrified of this man who would have to be about 8 feet tall to see in my window. Finally, I ran in and was hysterical with my parents that the man was looking in my window. My dad, fed up with this shit and maybe a bit scared that Peter Bear was after his daughter, ran out into the backyard, just in his underpants, which is terrifying enough, and of course saw nothing. I saw the man a few more times, but our family eventually moved to Rochester, New York. I told this story to some people on Facebook as they were talking about seeing shadow people or whatever. My sister, who is 6 years younger than me, called me about 10 minutes later and said, "Don't you remember?" I had no idea what she was talking about, and she said, "When I was 5 or 6, I saw Abe Lincoln in our hallway every night." And I said it was Abe Lincoln because he wore a black suit and a top hat. We both shat bricks.
I had a few recurring dreams when I was little. The first one was where I was in a crib and I rolled over and there was an alligator next to me. The other one involves a big fire and a whole bunch of exercise machines. There was also one with a lighthouse at sea, a storm, and a girl riding a whale. I also have this really distinct memory from when I was like 3 or 4. It was maybe 9 o'clock and I was playing with some toys, a bunch of wooden shapes. I turned around to do something, and when I looked back, the shapes formed together to make what looked like a little spaceship, and my dad was just standing there, looking straight ahead. All of a sudden, I hear this loud whirring noise that sounds like it's coming from our backyard. Then something started pounding away on the front door, like someone was trying to break in. I also heard voices, almost alien. Oh my God, I'm looking at what I'm writing right now and I realize I sound insane. Not the point. Anyway, my dad actually reacts to this and grabs me and pushes me into my room and closes the door. I don't remember anything after that because I woke up on the floor. I have no idea whether this was all some sort of dream or anything. Maybe I was tired or something. I never really brought it up again because I'm sure I would sound crazy.
I've got 3 stories. 2 took place in the same apartment. I'll start with those. Be around 11 years old, home from school. Parents are at work. Stay in my room all day, either sleeping or derping on the computer. Leave once to pee. Nothing interesting happens. I hear them come home, so I leave my room once more. They are furious with me because there is white paint all over the kitchen. I come to the kitchen and see the paint everywhere. I swear up and down I have no idea how that happened. I didn't even know we had paint in the house. Parents just kind of shrug it off. Next story. Same apartment. Go out with parents to get dinner. Come home to see a half circle of maybe 100 small blood drops next to the bathroom door, which has been closed since we left. It's a perfect circle shape. The blood drops look as though they were placed gently with an eyedropper. Open the bathroom door and find what looks like a piece of flesh and hair mushed together. We moved out maybe 2 months later. My parents and I still get chills when we remember this night. Last story, not really unexplained, but really screwed up for a kid to hear. Be 7 years old, around 3 a.m. I've always had sleeping problems, so I was awake and reading, hear loud bangs next door, freak out and hide under covers, somehow fall asleep. Next day, crime scene tape is out there, taping off the house. I overhear my parents ask what happened. A cop replied that there was a drug deal gone bad and someone was shot to death. The wall the man died leaning against was the wall of my bedroom that my bed was pressed against. No idea how a bullet didn't come through the wall, but thank God it didn't. I have a couple other weird things I remember from my childhood, if anyone is interested. Since I was maybe 6 or 7, I've always been afraid of windows at night. The reason being because I always feel that there is someone out there staring in at me. I've heard tapping, deep laughter, and heavy breathing coming from outside my window from the time I was 6 till the time I moved into a different apartment, the one with the paint and blood spots, when I was 9. It all stopped when one of our neighbors called the cops when they saw a figure of a man standing outside my bedroom window late at night. Police came out and investigated the area. In the bushes beneath my window were a dozen bullet shells and nothing else. To this day, windows at night freak the ever-living hell out of me. Thankfully, though, I haven't heard or seen anything strange outside a window since the night that neighbor called the cops.
Be about 8 to 10 years old. Chilling on the dead-end street I used to live on. Lived on the dead-end part with a friend next door. It's about 10 p.m., sitting on the sidewalk just chillin'. Tell her I've been seeing weird things. She has been too. Weird things are ghosts. I thought I was the only one. Name. Look. Look at the intersection of our street and the street perpendicular. It's a yellow school bus. Lolwat. What school would be letting out right now? We don't even have public transportation in our town. Another car drives by. Holy shit, it's gonna crash. Car goes straight through the bus. All of my watts. People start getting off the bus. What? They get off one by one. You can only see the top half of the bodies. Half-body things walk off in all different directions, but not towards us. Bus dissolves into thin air. Name. You saw that too, right? The bus? Yeah. To this day, we haven't talked about it. Another story. Same friend in my house. Be about 7:45 a.m. Mom went to drop off my siblings at their school, and she's coming back to pick us up and drop us off at the junior high. I'm in the kitchen getting some water, looking out the window above the sink. Friend is in the living room looking out into the backyard. Boom. Flash of light in my backyard. Holy shit, lightning? It wasn't even raining. WTF. 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 WTF? Get outside, friend behind me. Birds are chirping, sun is shining. Nothing. Lowell what? You saw that too? Yep. I wonder if people at school heard the boom. Get to school. People have heard the boom. The school is 10 minutes away. I told them what it was. They won't believe us.
I used to live behind my school, and in my backyard was a field and then Crapton of woods. Anyways, my bedroom was upstairs and I had a big bay window, so I could basically see everything that went on in the woods field. Lots of crazy shit. Not creepy, creepy sighting. Saw a bunch of people dressed in black in a circle once. Pretty sure it was just older kids being idiots. Saw a man park his truck in the school parking lot, then drag a sack into the woods, come out a couple hours later without the sack. Never went to look for it. Convinced I saw a werewolf dart out of one part of the forest and into the other side across the field. It looked like the classic bipedal werewolf, but he was able to run on all fours. Shadow people. Fucking shadow people. I remember looking out in the field. Nothing. I looked back a second later and saw a shadow figure standing about 150 yards away, directly lined up to my window. I remember that even though he was so far away feeling like he could see me, he had no eyes that I could see, but it felt like we locked eyes. I ducked and hid under my covers, and every time I looked out he had moved 10, 15 yards closer to my backyard. I remember the lights on the back of the school going out. After he got about 50 yards away, I flipped and ran to my sister's room and slept on her floor. Honestly, I've never felt that level of fear before, or that sense of danger.
I've seen crazy shit out my window too. One night, when I was like 14, I was getting water from the kitchen. From the big kitchen window, I can see this big pond or swamp in this huge field forest area behind my neighborhood. It was like 2 in the morning, and I saw humanoid figures coming out of the swamp. I almost shit my pants, because me and my friends used to hang out there during the day and find weird V-shaped footprint things. I never fucking went there again, and I stay in after dark.
Shit, forgot about this for so long, but it still comes back to me often enough to remember it vividly. I was in my first house here in Australia. I woke up one night and was completely paralysed. Couldn't move at all. I felt this completely different kind of terror. Around this age, I used to have pretty bad dreams, but eventually learnt to exit them, forcing my eyes really shut and opening them again. This time, I just couldn't. Jesus, it's hard to explain dreams, but usually in my nightmares, something would be off. Something would tell me that it's a nightmare. Normally it's a giant hole, where any light should be in the centre of my room, but looking around in this one, nothing was off. I even remember my TV light was on. Anyway, I'm lying there. I can't do anything. And I look at the door, directly in front of my bed, as it opens, and a good few figures come walking through it. There's no sound, just silence. I can't even describe what they looked like. About 6 feet tall, but there's hardly any light, so I can't make out details. 1 or 2 of them walked up to me and I blacked out. I woke up the next morning and I was in bed, but Christ, I was freaked out. I'm not even sure if it was a dream. It was just so damn vivid. Still gives me chills to remember it. Sorry if my prose is kinda shit tonight, been drinking.
I have various ones from my childhood. From iPod 14, playing music on a separate playlist, to seeing shit hover. And then there's my sleepwalking. I've always sleptwalked, and whenever my parents find me sleepwalking, I mention demons. Obviously not a memory, but it involved me as a child. I can only recall 2 of these times. The first time I was 8. I was apparently standing in the doorway talking. My dad found me and I mentioned demons. I then get on the floor and sleep. My dad carried me to my bed and stays with me until I stopped being restless. The second time was last year. I went into the dining room at 1 a.m. and made a bowl of cereal. My mother watched the whole ordeal and asked me after I stared at it for 10 minutes. I turned to her and said the demons were hungry and walked up to my room and went to bed. Sadly, I have no recollection of these events and I'm going off what my parents have told me.
Time slowed down for me once. Was anywhere from 8, 12 at the time. I was sitting in the living room with my parents and brother watching TV, and my dad always had the remote. Always. Anyway, he got up to go make a sandwich or something, and he tossed the remote over to the couch where I was sitting. I clearly remember time slowing down right after it left his hand, and it coming at me in slow motion or some shit, so I reached out. At normal speed, I was immune to it for some reason, and grabbed it. When I touched it again, time sped back up and my dad had paused and was staring at me like I had just sprouted another head and told me I had grabbed it like it was a damn ham sandwich and I was starving. I just shrugged everyone's weird looks off and changed the TV to cartoons. Hasn't happened since.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more Greentext will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.